may be the Eagle of Ku, but this plan he concocted to break down the front gate so Hikari and his allies could take back the Kingdom of Ku has got to be one of the weirdest ideas I've ever heard of. Using boulders to block the wind into a giant valley, then unleashing it so that a powerful sandstorm happens to knock down the gates to Ku? Yeah, okay, buddy, keep on dreaming. There's no way that's going to work.
What is... It's a sandstorm! Run!
His plan worked, the mad bastard.
I've never felt such fierce winds! The eagle adds another verse to his legend!
Well, I'll be darned, it actually worked. But should it have worked? That's a good question. There's only one way to find out. We have to discuss exactly how this would work in a world like ours. To start, let's go into Kazan's plan a little bit more. He says the following to Hikari regarding his plan.
What? The wind is howling.
The Valley of Sandstorms, they call it. Wind from this region is funneled into this pass. At one end, we've stacked rocks to keep the wind from escaping. I've delved into the records of this region's weather. At present, strong currents from the eastern sea flow into the valley. What do you think will happen when those frigid winds are finally given release? A storm will sweep across the land. One powerful enough to force a gate open.
That sounds like something out of a children's tale. Do you really mean to manipulate the winds themselves?
Did you forget who you're talking to? The Eagle of Ku is not bound by myth. He makes it.
Just listening to this plan and reading it through, I can't blame Hikari for his skepticism. I too was skeptical about this plan. I wasn't sure if it will work or not. Then it did. Well, it is a video game. I guess the devs decided yes, this works regardless, but meteorologically, does it make sense? Is it truly possible to create a sandstorm by blocking the wind with rocks at one end of a valley? This is one of those times I really had to sit down and think. I've never heard of such a thing happening before in the entirety of Earth. I don't think there are many, if any scenarios at all, that would constitute people using boulders to block the wind's flow temporarily, then moving said boulders to force a giant windstorm. My initial instinct was screaming at me that this was completely and utterly impossible, but I don't make judgment calls based on an instinct. Let's go into it a little and see what determinations can be made. Kazan tells us that strong wind currents from the eastern sea flow into the valley. Taking a look at where Ku is in relation to the ocean, it's not the closest, but it's also not the furthest either. Initially, this indicates to me that we're dealing with smaller scale winds, but not so small that they don't move anything at all. Okay, that doesn't mean much to pretty much anybody unless your name is mine. So what do we mean by smaller scale winds? Well, I've been trying to avoid this for a long time. I'm not even kidding. Winds can get very complicated very quickly. But today, we finally get to this topic that I've been trying to avoid. Winds can get a little bit dicey because they occur on different scales. Wind can occur in the microscale, the mesoscale, the synoptic scale, and the global wind scale. That might feel overwhelming, but I'm going to get us through this and how it all relates back to this initial problem. Hang in there, I got you. Let's start with the winds that this is most certainly not and go from there. Microscale winds are our smallest scale winds. These last for literal seconds or minutes, typically being seen in small-scale phenomena like wind gusts, dust devils, and wind eddies. These small-scale winds can have a horizontal dimension of 0.001 to 2 kilometers, so quite tiny in comparison to many weather events. I'm going to go on the record, and you can quote me on this, that winds of this scale are likely not what Kazan is talking about when he's mentioning the eastern winds. Why? Well, usually winds on this scale, unless they're highly concentrated, are going to be strong enough to blow a gate wide open. While the channel they're being blocked in would concentrate the winds and make them stronger, theoretically, given how small microscale winds are on the horizontal scale, this decidedly would not be enough to open a gate the size of the one in Ku, hence why I'm eliminating it from contention. For similar reasons, I'm going to eliminate global scale winds as well. When we speak about global wind patterns, we're talking about a general wind pattern that influences the currents of the oceans across the multiple latitudes. Imagine we're on Earth for a second here. When I talk about a global wind pattern, we're talking about something that extends from 0 degrees to 30 degrees north or south, or a general wind pattern that extends from 30 to 60 degrees north or south, or a wind pattern that extends from 60 degrees north and south and onward. Look, that's a large scale and it's going to impact climatic factors rather than one case of winds blowing open a gate. Hence, this leaves us with two other options. This leaves us with the options of the mesoscale and the synoptic scale. Conveniently, these types of winds are associated with many major weather events we see on Earth. I'll start with the larger of the two. The synoptic scale has horizontal dimensions of 200 kilometers to 10,000 kilometers. That's quite the scale. These can be weather phenomena such as hurricanes, the jet stream, warm fronts, cold fronts, and more. I think you get the idea. These are usually quite large in scale and aren't prone to localized winds we see running through this passage to open the gates of Ku. So, where does that leave us? We have one last wind type, and this is our solution. I'll explain why. The mesoscale has horizontal dimensions from 2 to 200 kilometers and is associated with weather events such as thunderstorms, lee waves, and Chinook winds. The one most people probably recognize is a thunderstorm. They can extend for several miles. Mesoscale events can be associated with strong winds occurring locally, and are likely the type of winds we're talking about with the winds from the Eastern Sea. These winds would be strong enough to force open a gate and are on the small enough scale that they simply wouldn't pass over or get stuck behind some boulders. Okay, so since we're on a larger scale than the microscale, though not as large of a scale as a synoptic scale, these winds would be capable of opening a gate. However, the original question still remains. How the heck is it possible for these winds to be trapped behind boulders and force a gate open? The answer, unfortunately, is a tad complicated. Hey, I warned you I had to think this through. I was not kidding. So, bit of a problem. Winds don't tend to get stuck behind boulders. In fact, it really doesn't get stuck behind anything at all. If anything, said features usually redirect the wind, not trap it behind something, especially if the winds are large scale, like synoptic scale winds or global scale winds. Yet another reason to eliminate those from contention, but we got that at this point. However, given that these winds are of mesoscale with large enough boulders, it could be possible for them to create an area where they could gather and maintain their strength. It depends on several things though, such as the topography of the land behind these boulders. The area where the wind is being stored cannot allow any wind to escape at all. If it does, the wind will simply flow into the escape channel. After all, wind constantly flows from high to low pressure. This channel would have to have absolutely no way for wind to escape. And I mean absolutely none. There can't even be a single crack in between these boulders. If there is, we're screwed. The wind will simply go through that channel, escape, and go from that high to low pressure. Now, if we could somehow manage to make an environment where wind could not escape from this channel under any circumstance, this would build up pressure behind the boulders. As soon as those boulders are removed, the wind would immediately rush out and seek lower pressure, going in the direction of the lowest pressure, which would likely be Ku's gate. Think of it as removing a cork from a bottle. You know how it makes that pop sound when you open it? It'd be a lot like that. Any air that was in that bottle was rushing out fast. The same would theoretically happen at the gates of Ku. Okay, so let's say that we magically don't have any wind escape from this channel, it builds up behind the boulders and releases as soon as the boulders are knocked over. They're relying on it creating a sandstorm. This could theoretically happen if there's enough loose dirt and sand in the path of the winds, which we know there is given that we're in a literal desert. For a sandstorm to form, we don't actually need strong wind speeds. Yeah, I know, that sounds wild, but the truth is that wind speeds as low as 25 miles per hour, or 40.23 kilometers per hour, can kick up sand and force a sandstorm to form. Yeah, that wasn't the most scientific way to put it, but sometimes I like phrasing things differently. It's more fun that way. The wind speeds aren't necessarily the problem in Ku. If they're truly trapped behind that boulder and needing to release from that high pressure area to a lower pressure area, those winds are going to be moving quickly in order to do that. I'm not disputing that a sandstorm could form. The hard part here is blocking out the wind. I think the biggest problem, and what makes this completely unbelievable, is that you can't perfectly seal the wind behind boulders. It's nearly impossible to pull off. Okay, maybe you have boulders that are perfectly shaped that would fit in the channel to block the wind from moving around them, but you'd have to perfectly block the wind from moving up and around. If there's even a crack in the boulders, the wind leaks through and stops this plan. You need boulders that are perfectly shaped to each other to ensure there are no cracks. And you know, the only guarantee we have here is that the winds happen at all. Frankly, that's not even a guarantee given that we can't trap it. Sorry, Kazan, as much as I appreciate your brilliant mind, I can't excuse this one. Scientifically, it just doesn't make sense. You may be the Eagle of Ku, but this, my friend, just cannot happen. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe. I have more on the way. I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day, everyone.